Hello everyone, and welcome to my General Hospital official channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up.
The courtroom was packed, the tension so thick it was almost suffocating. Everyone had gathered to witness what was supposed to be a routine hearing, one that Michael Corinthos had prepared for with icy determination. But deep inside, his heart was pounding, and every glance toward Willow made his chest tighten with guilt. The judge's gavel echoed, silencing the murmurs as Michael rose from his seat. His eyes darted toward his wife, who looked confused yet supportive, unaware that everything she believed about their life was about to change. Willow smiled softly at him, that same gentle, trusting smile that had always grounded him, and that was what made this moment unbearable. Michael took a deep breath, his voice trembling slightly as he stood before the court. "Your Honor, before we proceed, there's something I need to say," he began, and the room instantly fell silent. Diane Miller, his attorney, shot him a sharp look, whispering, "Michael, now's not the time," but he ignored her. His mind was made up. He couldn't carry the weight of the secret any longer. He looked over at Nina, who was sitting at the other side of the courtroom, her expression guarded but curious. She didn't yet know that the storm about to hit would tear through both of their lives. Willow's fingers tightened around the edge of the table. "Michael," she whispered softly, fear flickering in her voice. She could sense something wasn't right. She'd seen that look in his eyes before, the same haunted, restless look he'd had after the truth about Nina being her biological mother had come out. Michael's gaze flickered toward her, and for a fleeting second, he thought about stopping, about burying the truth again. But the guilt had been eating at him for months. Lies had already poisoned too many lives. "I can't keep this secret anymore," he said aloud, his tone filled with anguish. "I've been living with something I should have told everyone a long time ago." The judge frowned, exchanging glances with the attorneys. "Mr. Corinthos, if this pertains to the case, proceed." "But if not," Michael interrupted, his voice breaking, "it pertains to everything. It pertains to my wife, my family, and what I've done." Willow felt her stomach twist. "Michael, what are you talking about?" she said shakily. The courtroom buzzed with whispers. Carly leaned forward from the gallery, her eyes wide with alarm. "Michael, don't do this," she mouthed, but it was too late. He looked at her, silently apologizing. He'd learned from her that sometimes, protecting family meant hiding the truth. But now, he was realizing that those lies had consequences that were about to explode. Michael swallowed hard. "The truth is," his voice trailed off for a moment as emotion choked him. The judge prompted him again, and he forced himself to continue. "The truth is that I knew what Nina did before the SEC charges were filed. I knew she was the one who turned in Carly and Drew." The courtroom erupted in gasps. Nina's eyes went wide with shock, her face turning pale. "What are you talking about?" she shouted. "That's not true." But Michael didn't back down. "It is true. You turned them in, and I found out months ago. I confronted you, but I didn't say anything. I let everyone believe someone else was responsible." Willow's face drained of color. She stared at him, her mind struggling to process his words. You knew?" she whispered, barely audible. "You knew what my mother did and you didn't tell me?" Her voice trembled with disbelief. Michael's lips quivered. "I was trying to protect you, Willow. You had just gone through your transplant, you were recovering. I couldn't risk your health by putting you through more stress." Willow stood, shaking her head in confusion and pain. "So you lied to me. All this time, you looked me in the eyes and let me think Nina was being unfairly treated? You let me feel guilty for cutting her out of my life?" Michael tried to reach for her hand, but she pulled away. "I did it for you," he pleaded. "For us." Nina rose from her seat, tears welling in her eyes. "You're lying to make me look bad," she snapped. "You were blackmailing me, Michael. You said if I stayed away from Willow and Wiley, you wouldn't tell anyone." The crowd gasped again. Carly's face froze. "You did what?" she exclaimed. The judge slammed the gavel again. Order in the court. But it was no use. The room had descended into chaos. Michael turned toward Nina. Yes, I said that. Because I wanted to protect my family. I didn't want Willow hurt by your betrayal. But it was wrong, all of it. He faced Willow again, his voice breaking. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I became exactly what I hated. I manipulated, I lied, and I let you live in a lie because I was scared to lose you. Willow looked like she'd been punched. You don't get to decide what's best for me, she said, her voice shaking. You should have trusted me, Michael. You should have believed that I could handle the truth. She clutched her chest, her breathing quickening. I can't believe this. Michael's eyes filled with panic as he saw her sway. Willow, please, just listen. But it was too late. Her knees buckled. The room gasped as she collapsed, fainting before anyone could catch her. Willow! Michael shouted, rushing to her side. Diane and Carly ran forward as well, while paramedics were called in. Michael held Willow in his arms, tears spilling down his cheeks. Wake up, baby, please. I'm sorry. He stroked her hair, his voice trembling. I should have told you everything. I should have trusted you. Carly's voice broke with emotion. Michael, what were you thinking? She demanded. You blew up your marriage, your family, everything in front of the entire courtroom. Michael didn't answer. He just kept holding Willow's hand as she was loaded onto the stretcher. Nina stood frozen, her expression a mixture of guilt, rage, and confusion. I never wanted this, she murmured. But Carly turned on her, her tone sharp. You started this, Nina. You set off this entire chain reaction. You turned me and Drew in, and now look what's happened. Nina's voice cracked. You think I wanted Willow to get hurt? She's my daughter, Carly, she cried, her tears streaming down. I've made mistakes, but Michael's been playing God with everyone's lives. As the courtroom cleared, Michael followed the paramedics out, his mind spinning. Every secret he'd buried was now exposed. The truth had finally come out, but at what cost? He sat in the waiting room of the hospital later that day, his head in his hands. Carly paced back and forth while Sonny arrived, his expression grim. What the hell happened? Sonny demanded. I heard the hearing went off the rails. Carly sighed heavily. Michael confessed that he knew Nina was the one who turned us into the SEC. He blackmailed her to stay away from Willow. Willow found out, and she collapsed. Sonny's jaw clenched. He turned toward Michael, his eyes cold. You crossed a line, son. I understand wanting to protect your family, but you played with people's lives. Michael looked up, eyes red. I know. And I'll never forgive myself if Willow doesn't wake up. Nina entered the hospital lobby quietly, escorted by a security guard. She approached Sonny and Carly cautiously. Is Willow okay? She asked softly, her voice cracking. Carly glared. You have no right to ask that. Sonny held up a hand, stopping her. Let her talk, he said flatly. Nina wrung her hands. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I was angry when I turned you in, Carly. Angry and hurt. But I never wanted to destroy Michael and Willow's marriage. I just wanted a chance to be part of my daughter's life. Michael stood, his voice rough. You had that chance, Nina. But you blew it, and I made it worse by trying to control everything. He sighed deeply. Maybe we both deserve to lose everything. Hours later, Willow finally stirred in her hospital bed, her eyes fluttering open. Michael was there instantly, clutching her hand. Hey, he whispered. You scared me half to death. Willow blinked, her voice hoarse. You told them? He nodded slowly. Everything. No more lies. She turned her face away, tears filling her eyes. You broke my heart, Michael. Not just because you lied, but because you thought I was too weak to handle the truth. Michael's voice was full of regret. I thought I was protecting you. I thought love meant shielding you from pain. But I see now that it means trusting you, even when it's hard. Willow stared at him, her silence saying everything. After a long pause, she whispered, I need time. I can't just pretend this didn't happen. Michael's shoulders slumped. I'll wait as long as it takes, he said softly. I'll do whatever it takes to earn your trust again. Outside the room, Carly watched through the glass, her face a mixture of worry and sadness. Sonny joined her. They'll get through this, he said quietly. They love each other. Carly sighed. Yeah, but love's not always enough. Sometimes the truth cuts too deep. Nina stood further down the hall, listening, guilt etched across her face. She whispered to herself, I wanted a family. And now I've helped destroy one. As the night deepened over Port Charles, the fallout of Michael's confession rippled through every corner of town. Trust had been shattered, loyalties questioned, and hearts broken. For Michael and Willow, the road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear, nothing would ever be the same again. The air in the courtroom was, as it always seemed to be in such places, both unnaturally still and electrically charged. It was a space where lives were dismantled and reassembled with the cold, clinical precision of the law, a place of wood polish, whispered anxieties, and the weight of 1,000 unspoken truths. On this day, however, the usual undercurrent of dramatic tension had escalated into a palpable, suffocating dread. The case, a complex web of corporate malfeasance, wrongful death, and deep-seated family vendettas, had already captivated the city of Port Charles. But today was different. Today was the day Michael Corinthos was scheduled to take the stand. Willow Corinthos, née Tate, sat in the front row, her posture a masterpiece of controlled composure. Her hands, clasped tightly in her lap, were the only betrayal of the storm raging within her. She was a vision in a simple, elegant dress, her blonde hair a soft frame for a face that had learned, through immense hardship, to conceal its tremors. Her eyes, fixed on her husband, were pools of unwavering support and thinly veiled terror. They had been through hell to get here, battles with illness, threats from all sides, the shadow of his family's notorious name, and the ever-present, toxic influence of Nina Reeves, the woman whose lies had stolen so much from them. Today felt like the beginning of the end, the final push to secure justice for the harm done to them and to solidify the safety of their family. Michael, dressed in a suit that seemed to armor him against the gravity of the moment, looked every inch the capable CEO of Aurora Media. He was no longer just the son of the feared Sonny Corinthos, he was his own man, a father, a husband, a force to be reckoned with. As he settled into the witness stand, his gaze found Willow's. A silent communication passed between them, a fleeting exchange of strength and love that had become their lifeline. He took a deep breath, adjusted the microphone, and prepared to swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. It was a promise he intended to keep, but the whole truth was a darker, more devastating creature than anyone in that room, least of all his wife, could have possibly imagined. The district attorney, a methodical and unassuming man, began with a gentle ease, guiding Michael through the foundational aspects of the case. They established the timeline, the business dealings between ELQ and the now-defunct company owned by Drew Kane and Michael's late uncle, A.J. Quartermain. They spoke of corporate espionage, of hostile takeovers engineered by Nina, and of the emotional and financial toll it had taken. Michael was articulate, calm, and precise. He was the perfect witness, his testimony building a brick-by-brick wall of evidence against the defendants. Willow listened, her heart swelling with a painful mix of pride and anxiety. Each answer he gave was a step towards vindication, a step towards a future where they could finally breathe easily. She allowed herself a small, private thought of that future, of their children, Wiley and Amelia, growing up without this constant shadow. She thought of the simple, profound peace of a life no longer defined by court dates and legal stratagems. Then, the district attorney approached the heart of the matter. Mr. Corinthos, can you please describe for the court the moment you became aware that Nina Reeves had been withholding vital information from you and your wife, specifically regarding the fact that she was Willow's biological mother? Michael's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. It was a profound betrayal, he began, his voice low but clear. We had been through so much. Willow was fighting for her life. She needed a bone marrow transplant, and the one person who could have helped, who had a moral and biological imperative to help, was hiding in plain sight, offering conditional help while actively working to destroy our family's company and my father's marriage. He spoke of the confrontation, the sheer audacity of Nina's deception, and the irreparable harm it had caused to Willow's health and their sense of security. The defense attorney, a sharp-eyed woman with a reputation for ruthless cross-examination, stood for her turn. She attempted to paint Michael as biased, as a man driven by a personal vendetta against her client, leveraging the courtroom to exact a personal revenge. She probed at his family, at his father's criminal empire, insinuating that the apple didn't fall far from the tree. Michael remained steadfast, deflecting her barbs with a cool, factual demeanor. My motivations are for justice, not revenge. What Nina Reeves did transcends personal animosity. It was a cruel, calculated series of choices that nearly cost my wife her life. The back and forth continued, the legal tennis match reaching a fever pitch. The defense attorney, growing increasingly frustrated with Michael's unflappable resolve, decided to go for the jugular. She zeroed in on the period immediately following the revelation of Nina's maternity, a time of immense stress and medical crisis. Mr. Corinthos, isn't it true that during your wife's severe illness, you yourself were under an incredible amount of pressure? That the lines between protecting your family and seeking to control the narrative became blurred? I was protecting my wife, Michael stated, his voice gaining a hard edge. There is no blurred line there. Is that so? The attorney pressed, a sly smile playing on her lips. She picked up a document from her table, making a show of reviewing it. Let's talk about the timeline of your wife's recovery. After the bone marrow transplant from Nina Reeves, there was a period of convalescence. A period where Willow was incredibly vulnerable, both physically and emotionally. Willow felt a prickle of unease crawl up her spine. Where was this going? This was all a matter of public record. She glanced at her mother, Carly, who sat beside her, and saw her own confusion mirrored in Carly's tense expression. During that time, the attorney continued, her voice dropping to a conversational, yet deadly, tone, you were her primary caregiver, is that correct? You managed her medical information, her visitors, her access to the outside world. Objection, the district attorney said, rising. Counsel's is insinuating without foundation. I have a foundation, Your Honor, the defense attorney retorted. I am establishing the witness's role and state of mind during a critical period. Overruled, the judge intoned. But get to your point, counselor. The attorney turned her full attention back to Michael. Mr. Corinthos, did you, or did you not, during that period, make a conscious decision to withhold a specific piece of correspondence from your wife? The air in the room seemed to freeze. Michael's face, for the first time that day, lost its mask of calm control. A muscle in his jaw twitched violently. Willow leaned forward, her brow furrowed in confusion. Correspondence? What correspondence? I don't know what you're referring to, Michael said, but his voice lacked its previous conviction. It was a hair too high, a shade too defensive. Oh, I think you do, the attorney purred, her confidence growing. She held up the document. This is a certified mail receipt, dated October 12th of last year. It is addressed to Mrs. Willow Corinthos at your home address. The sender is the New York State Department of Health, Vital Records Division. A collective, silent gasp seemed to ripple through the courtroom. Willow's heart, which had been beating a frantic tattoo against her ribs, suddenly felt like it had stopped altogether. The Vital Records Division. Birth certificates. Death certificates. A cold, terrible dread began to pool in the pit of her stomach. Michael had gone pale. He stared at the document as if it were a venomous snake. That was a stressful time. Willow's immune system was compromised. Any stress, any upset, could have been detrimental to her recovery. Her doctors were very clear. So, you are admitting that you intercepted this piece of mail? The attorney pressed, her voice rising with theatrical triumph. It wasn't the right time, Michael insisted, his eyes flickering towards Willow, pleading for understanding she couldn't yet give. I was trying to protect her. Protect her from what, Mr. Corinthos? The attorney boomed, turning to face the jury. What could possibly be in a letter from the Vital Records Division that required such paternalistic protection? Or was it not protection, but control? A desire to manage what your wife knew, and when she knew it? Objection. Argumentative, the DA shouted. Sustained, the judge said, but the damage was hurtling towards its inevitable, catastrophic conclusion. Your Honor, I would like to enter this document into evidence, and I have one further question for the witness based on its contents, the defense attorney said, her eyes gleaming. The procedural formalities passed in a blur for Willow. The world had narrowed to the pounding in her ears and the sight of her husband's ashen face. He had hidden something from her. Something from the Vital Records Division. Something he knew would upset her so profoundly he felt he had to conceal its existence. The trust that was the very bedrock of their marriage, a foundation they had built upon the ruins of so many other betrayals, suddenly felt like it was cracking apart. The document was entered. The attorney turned back to Michael, who looked utterly broken on the stand, his confident CEO persona shattered into a million pieces. Mr. Corinthos, she said, her voice now soft, almost gentle, which was more terrifying than her previous aggression. Based on your interception of this letter, and the subsequent follow-up you personally initiated while keeping your wife in the dark, will you now please tell the court, and more importantly, tell your wife, what you discovered about her birth certificate? Specifically, the name listed as her biological father? Time stopped. The entire courtroom ceased to exist. For Willow, there was only Michael's face, contorted in an agony of guilt and fear. Her mind raced, a frantic, disjointed montage of her life. Her childhood with Harmony, a woman whose motherhood was a toxic cocktail of neglect and fanaticism. The lifelong search for an identity, for a sense of belonging. The peace she had finally found in knowing the truth about Nina, as painful as it was. The father, her father had always been a blank space, a mystery she had long since given up on solving, a ghost she had made peace with. Michael's lips moved. He tried to form words, but no sound came out. He looked at Willow, his eyes filled with a desperate, hopeless love. Tell her, Michael, the attorney commanded softly. Tell her the truth you've been hiding for months. And so, he did. His voice was a raw, broken whisper, amplified by the courtroom microphone into a deafening roar. The name on the original, long-form birth certificate, the man listed as your biological father, is Cyrus Renaud. The name hung in the air, a poisonous cloud that no one could quite comprehend at first. Cyrus Renaud. The notorious drug lord, the violent convict, the man who had brought untold misery and violence to Port Charles. The man who was, by sheer, twisted fate, also the half-brother of Laura Collins, the city's beloved mayor. A monster. A predator. For a single, suspended second, there was only silence. Willow's brain simply refused to process the words. It was as if he had spoken in a foreign language, the syllables bouncing off her consciousness without meaning. She saw Carly's hand fly to her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. She heard a sharp intake of breath from the jury box. She saw the look of grim satisfaction on Nina's face from the defense table. Then, the meaning crashed down upon her. Cyrus Renaud. The man who had threatened her family. The man whose very name was synonymous with evil in their lives. The man whose blood was in her veins. The truth was not just a fact, it was a physical, violent assault on her very being. It unraveled the core of who she was. She was not just the daughter of a selfish, lying woman, she was the biological child of a genuine monster. The shame, the horror, the sheer, gut-wrenching revulsion was instantaneous and all-consuming. Her eyes, wide with disbelief and dawning terror, locked with Michael's. In his gaze, she saw the confirmation, the agony of his secret, the desperate plea for forgiveness. But it was too late. The truth was out, and it was a killing thing. A strangled, guttural sound escaped her lips, a noise of pure, unadulterated despair. The world, which had already narrowed, now began to tilt on its axis. The stark lights of the courtroom swam and blurred into a nauseating kaleidoscope. The air grew thick, impossible to breathe. The voices around her, Carly's sharp cry of Willow, the judge's call for order, the sudden uproar from the gallery, all melted into a distant, roaring hum. Her body went numb. The strength that had carried her through leukemia, through a bone marrow transplant, through betrayal and heartache, deserted her completely. It was as if the truth itself had reached inside her and severed the strings that held her up. She felt a hand on her arm, Carly's, but it was a distant sensation, like being touched through layers of wool. Her vision tunneled, darkening at the edges until the only thing she could see was Michael's horrified face, a final, haunting image before the darkness rushed in to claim her. Her body went limp, sliding soundlessly from the wooden bench and collapsing onto the cold, hard floor of the courtroom in a dead faint. The subsequent chaos was a world away from Willow. The gasp of the crowd that turned into a panicked roar. The judge's gavel pounding fruitlessly against the sound of scrambling bailiffs. Carly's desperate scream as she dropped to her knees beside her daughter's lifeless form. The district attorney shouting for someone to call an ambulance. But none of it mattered to Michael. For him, the world had shattered the moment the words left his mouth. He was on his feet, his own legal peril forgotten. "Willow! Let me through!" "Willow," he yelled, fighting against the bailiff who was trying to restrain him, his professional composure utterly obliterated by the sight of the woman he loved lying broken on the floor because of his secret, his choice, his catastrophic failure to protect her. From the defense table, Nina Reeves watched the scene unfold with a complex, unreadable expression. The shock of the revelation was there, yes, the realization that her one-time ally and tormentor, Cyrus Renault, was the father of her child. But it was quickly overshadowed by a surge of vindictive triumph. Michael Corinthos, the self-righteous son of Carly, had just been publicly eviscerated. He had hidden this from his wife, and in doing so, he had handed Nina a weapon she never knew she had. The look on his face was a prize she would savor. The paramedics arrived with a gurney, their efficient movements cutting through the hysteria. Carly was right there, her voice trembling but firm, providing them with Willow's medical history as they checked her vitals and carefully lifted her onto the stretcher. Michael finally broke free and stumbled to her side, his face a mask of utter devastation. "I'm so sorry," he choked out, his hand reaching for Willow's limp one. "I'm so sorry, Willow. I was trying to protect you." But she couldn't hear him. She was lost in a darkness of his making, a void of a truth so horrific it had literally stolen her consciousness. As the paramedics rushed the stretcher out of the courtroom, followed by a frantic Carly and a shattered Michael, the judge called for a recess, his voice struggling to restore order to the unprecedented scene. The trial was, for the moment, completely derailed. The legal battle over corporate misdeeds and personal betrayals had been rendered trivial by a biological truth so shocking it had the power to physically destroy. In the hallway, as the stretcher was wheeled towards the waiting ambulance, the frenzy continued. Reporters, drawn by the commotion, shouted questions, their cameras flashing, adding to the surreal nightmare. Michael ignored them all, his entire being focused on Willow's pale, unconscious face. Carly turned on him, her eyes blazing with a ferocious mix of fear and fury. "You knew?" she hissed, her voice low and venomous so the reporters wouldn't hear. "You knew Cyrus Renault was her father and you didn't tell her? Michael, how could you?" "I was going to," he cried, his voice cracking with emotion. "After the transplant, when she was stronger. I saw what the news about Nina did to her. I couldn't lay this on her too. Not then. Not with Cyrus still being a threat. I thought I was buying her time to heal." "You were buying yourself time." Carly shot back, her maternal instinct to protect Willow overriding her love for her son. "You were afraid of how she would react, afraid it would change how she saw herself, how she saw you." "This wasn't protection, Michael, this was a lie of omission, and it just exploded in your face and almost killed her." The paramedics loaded Willow into the ambulance. "Only one family member can ride with us," one of them stated. "I'm her mother," Carly said, her tone broking no argument. She climbed in, shooting a final, scathing look at Michael before the doors slammed shut, separating him from his wife. Michael stood frozen on the courthouse steps, watching the ambulance pull away, its siren a mournful wail that echoed the screaming in his own soul. The crisp autumn air did nothing to cool the fever of his guilt and shame. He was alone, surrounded by a cacophony of noise and judgment, but he heard none of it. All he could hear was the echo of his own voice in the silent, condemning courtroom. Cyrus Renaud. He had sought justice in that courtroom. He had wanted to expose Nina's lies and secure his family's future. Instead, he had become the source of the most profound betrayal his wife would ever know. He had confessed a truth, but in doing so, he had revealed his own lie, and the collateral damage was the woman he had sworn to protect, lying unconscious, her world, and theirs, irrevocably shattered. The fight was no longer in a courtroom. The fight was now for Willow's life, for her sanity, and for a marriage that had just been tested in the most brutal way imaginable. And as Michael stood there, utterly broken, he knew with a chilling certainty that the battle to come would be the hardest of his life. He had lost her trust, perhaps forever, and the path to winning it back was a dark and uncertain one, paved with the wreckage of a secret he never should have kept. The shocking truth was out, and its aftermath was only just beginning.